And thanks for staying with us on the marketplace. We begin with this warning. Rating agency Fitch has indicated that it will not hesitate to downgrade the country's credit worthiness to default status. That's if Ghana's finances do not improve soon. This was captured in the agency's latest report on the country's credit assessment. George Affe has details.
This is one of the scenarios captured in the agency's report on Ghana in terms of the way forward when it comes to the country's credit ratings. It indicated that Fitch will respond accordingly if the country's finances worsens due to slippages or, let's say, worsening debt market conditions. Fitch was also quick to add that it would not hesitate to move Ghana into an improved position should the country's finances improve. The latest verdict on Ghana by Fitch is more of a warning to investors of the likelihood that the Ghana government could default on its bonds when the payment dates are due to the current challenges it is having with its finances. Now, this warning is required because these investors depend on the report by Fitch to participate in Ghana bonds. A careful look at the report showed that Fitch was also worried that closing an IMF deal by the second quarter of this year could be under threat. That is, if government is not able to present a credible plan on dealing with Ghana's debt situation after IMF placed Ghana on high risk of debt distress for last year. Ghana is also due to make some $2.7 billion payment to investors before the close of this year. And there are concerns that looking at its current financial position, it might struggle to do this. For some, the biggest challenge here is how this will impact negatively on private firms in the country that might want to go to the international market to raise some funds.
Well, joining us as senior finance lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School, Dr. Patrick Isuming. Thanks for your time this afternoon. What would you do with this kind of warning if you're managing the economy? This warning of a further downgrade to default status if our finances don't improve?
Good afternoon, Daryl, and good afternoon to viewers. So I think it's really a wake-up call that something more drastic needs to happen with our public finances. So, you know, this has come on the back of just recently we've reviewed the mid-year budget where we provided an update on our fiscal positions. Obviously, the rating agencies haven't found that to be very impressive at all. So I think it means that, you know, more drastic measures are needed in terms of addressing the expenditure issues as well as bringing in more revenue lines. So I think that's the simple message to the government. Whatever you've been doing in the 6 months or, you know, in the first 8 months of the year, the markets haven't found it to be convincing enough. So more needs to be done.
And just for the education of our audience, what would a default status mean?
Well, it's to essentially mean that, you know, if you lend to the country, we are setting to default. That, you know, when it's time for us to repay, we'll not be able to repay. That is, I mean, where we are is bad enough. But if you are in default, I'm not sure that you get any institution being willing to lend to us.
Do you see that happening?
Not in the immediate term. I think if you look at our reserve position, we still have something to go for a few months. And, you know, we are entering the season where the cocoa loan should start kicking in. So, and then also, we are aware that there's some agreement in Parliament for the government to get some additional borrowing from other sources. So in the immediate term, I think it looks like that's probably not, a default is unlikely to happen, I mean, this year, if at all.
Yeah, government's response to S&P was to tout the bold measures it has taken recently to raise revenue and cut down on expenditure. I bet it's still their response to Fitch's downgrade. Is that a good response enough, if you like, to this recent assessment on our credit worthiness?
Well, I think, you know, the posturing when government responds by criticizing is not helpful. I mean, the last response by the finance ministry was just recapping the measures that the rating agencies are already seen. Their message was that this is not enough. This doesn't impress us. So instead of responding and repeating exactly what they already know, I think the government would have been better served indicating that they are going to redouble their efforts to fix, to improve the fiscal situation rather than go on that trajectory of criticizing.
Well, the thing with this kind of assessment is that it has a way of affecting us when we are seeking external funds. But yesterday when I spoke with another financial analyst, he expressed fear this has the potential of affecting the domestic market and that it could send bad signals to the domestic investors. They would pull out, if you like. Do you figure that may also happen?
So, I mean, for a while, we have allowed foreigners to participate in the CD-denominated assets, some of the medium-term ones. I think those ones could be at risk. I think in terms of issuing domestic bonds, probably not. But there's another impact in the sense that whilst the external options get limited, government will be forced to turn more onto the domestic market. So the impact on domestic interest rates and what that will do for the private sector borrowing is where the problem is likely to lie.
Yeah, and fears that this competition between government and the private sector might affect SMEs and the ability to get loans. Thank you so much for joining us with your perspective. Dr. Patrick Esuming there. He is a senior finance lecturer with the University of Ghana Business School. Well, so yesterday, the Statistical Service released the July inflation figure of 31.7%. However, the rate of increase has slowed down over time. Some analysts have suggested that we have reached the peak, but government statistician Professor Samuel Kobnenim says it's too early to reach that conclusion. Listen.
Between May and June 2022, we saw a 2.2 variation, and now we are recording a 1.9 variation between June and July 2022. I think it will be early days for us to say that it's peaked, and I think it will be early days for us to say that the variations on a month-on-month from between 2 months for year-on-year inflation is also showing a decline. Although, admissibly, we are seeing that between March and April 2022, we saw 4.2, and now we are seeing 1.9. Why we say it's early days is that if you pay attention to the disaggregations, last month we saw that the contribution of food inflation really dropped by about 2.1 percentage points, and non-food inflation was driving it, and now we are seeing a reverse of that. So at the level of disaggregation, we're seeing a lot of variations in terms of what is driving it. So at this stage, it's difficult for one to pinpoint what is really driving the 4.2 that variation that we saw between March and April 2022 and the 1.9 variation that we are seeing between June and July 2022. So we would hesitate to say that we've peaked and we're going to see a drop, but we're going to monitor and see what happens in August, September, and see whether we have some discernible patterns to enable us to say that we've peaked and we're going to see a decline moving forward.
Economist with Data Bank, Courage Buti, joins us with some perspective to this story. And so, Courage, government statisticians saying it's too early to take a victory lap. We are not out of the woods yet. What's your perspective based on the trend we have seen over the past few months? Have we reached the peak?
Well, a very good afternoon to your listeners. Just a bit of correction. I'm with GCB Capital now, not with Data Bank. So please, just a point of note. Yes, I agree with Professor Nim on his assertions, and the reasons I believe are spot on. The trends in the data are actually at a point now where you can't conclusively say that we've reached a peak. I must say that what in statistics you call a point of inflection is more appropriate now, because the slope of the curve seems to have slowed down. The rate of increases on a monthly basis have slowed down. Yes, he's right. From April thereabout, we've seen the monthly rate of increase slow from some 4.2% in April to 4% in May to 2.2% in June and now to 1.9%. Clearly, it's on a decline. So you can say that the rate of increase has slowed down. You look at it on a month-to-month basis, from April, food inflation declined from 4.2% change to 3.5 to 0.6 in June, which was quite significant. But then in July, you see a climb again above the 0.6, now to 1.6. And the reverse happened for non-food, where it declined from 4.3, increased to 4.4, decreased to 3.4, and now 2.2. So there is no clear discernible trend at this point in time to say that inflation has peaked. And if anything at all, the recent spate of depreciation and it passed through to general prices. And the fact that even if crude oil prices are declining on world market, exchange rate is a big part of the determination of export prices. And then to the extent that exchange rate pressures remain, it could even erode the gains on crude oil prices, and by extension, would actually keep fuel prices at the pump elevated. And then there is the small matter of the utility tariff review that has been deferred, its implementation deferred, coming to stream, I believe, next September. All of these are price pressures. And so I believe it's early days yet to anyone to start jumping that inflation has peaked. But there are signs that it's approaching a peak.
Yeah, some have said this is the government statistician being too careful, not to say we have peaked, and then, like you say, there are so many things that can happen between now and the end of the year that could either cause inflation to rise or go down. So what do we attribute the slowdown in the rate to? Because fuel prices are still high out there, food is still expensive. I think the monetary measures that have been implemented by the central bank over time, seeing that, again, this is an issue with supply.
Well, yes. So the causes are supply driven mainly. And I do not necessarily think food prices are high because there are no foods on the market. I think for food inflation, mostly, if you go to market with money, you get food to buy. And there are lots of it on the market. I think it's an issue of the input costs, and then the
high fuel
mechanisms
prices
that bring these food items to the market. So those, you would say, are cost push factors. And of course, there are supply challenges with regard to crude oil, and of course, the exchange rate situation and all of that. So these are multifaceted problems that any one of them could trigger inflation, really. And I do not necessarily think Prof. Enim is cautious. I think the data he's speaking to, which I've just outlined, seem to be showing no discernible trend. In my updates last month, I mentioned that if you look at the changes in inflation, month-to-month changes, if you look at food inflation, monthly food inflation, and monthly non-food inflation, month-to-month food and non-food inflation, it peaked in April, and then we were on a path of decline from May and June. But here we are in July, that trend reversed, where you are seeing food inflation pick up again, and then non-food inflation sustain the decline. So at this point, and the July print, which went to 31.7, you can say chiefly was driven by food inflation. And so then there is really no discernible trend now. I know the harvest season is upon us. Probably from the next print, we could see the harvest effect kick in for maybe August and September, and sometime into October also. Now, all of those are a pull on the inflation. And I know base effects have also trickled in, which would all be positives for inflation. But I just outlined the fact that the cedi is back under pressure. For the month of August alone, we recorded more than 5% depreciation already. And in the third quarter, July till date, it's almost 10% depreciation of the cedi. Now, all of this will impact general prices on the market. We are an import-dependent economy. There is already the small matter of imported inflation from most of the economies that we are buying from, who are experiencing very high inflation. So it's not too clear now what the next direction or next path of inflation will be. And that is why I think it's not being cautious. I think the data just haven't confirmed that there is a peak yet.
Yeah, and well, food, there's no food shortage. Food is expensive because of factors such as high fuel prices. We need to point out that as well. So how do we sustain this trend of a slowdown? What can we do? Well,
it would mean the triggers of inflation are looked at. I do not know what exactly will be done to food production at the moment, because I do not believe the problem is production. So can we start thinking about transport mechanism for these foods to get to the market centers in a way that is not too burdensome the way it is now? Can we think about, if it's about input costs and fertilizers are so high in price and all of that, and government, I think, has also reduced their subsidy from the 50% subsidy to something just around, I think, under 20%, the last ahead of it. Now, if farmers are paying higher cost of production, naturally, it also feed into what prices they sell on the market. And if the transport arrangement, fuel prices are feeding into all of these. And so can we start to think of a national haulage system where food from the farm gate can have a process of getting into the market in a defined way, where the government can subsidize or even support that process? It's something we could think about. The depreciation, until we stop it, and I do not know immediate solutions to stopping it, because reserves are weak, foreigners are spooked, our budget doesn't help, and so people are moving out of our economies in droves. What do we do immediately to solve it? I think hastening the process of conversation with the IMF, if that happens and the program is in place, we have CD stabilized, and then its pass-through to inflation can also be halted. Fuel prices, there are no immediate solutions. I mean, I can't argue for taking off the taxes because I know government is struggling with revenue already. And so the solutions are more long-term than immediate. And we might have to just keep doing the little we can do now to support at least the productive sides of the economy, and that could help forestall it.
Courage, we have just 30 seconds on this. I want to pick your thoughts on this new warning from Fitch that we could further be downgraded to a default status if our finances do not improve soon. What do you make of this latest warning?
It is a possibility, and that is all what a negative outlook means. Fitch is at a point where now their next downgrade option will be to a DDD, which is a partial default. Then eventually when you default, you go to the D. And so, but I do not see that happening immediately, because yes, while the risk factors are quite obvious and our reserves do not support large outflows going forward, or you make us more vulnerable, I think that government has to realize at this point that we need to consolidate. And what they did with half-year review, where the deficit target increased from 38 billion to 39 billion, is no consolidation at all. I think the earlier we realize that and come back to have the market on our side, the better. Those are ways we can avoid further downgrade. It is a possibility, but I feel we still have some leg room to operate for now.
All right. Thank you so much, Courage, and congratulations on your new move to GCB Capital, and thanks for sharing it with us on live TV. All the best in your endeavors.
All right. Thank you. All right.
All right, let's turn to other news for you. The European Union and the German Development Corporation have jointly launched a 2.8 million euro vaccine manufacturing project. The project will be implemented over a 27-month period for the institutional and technical strengthening of Ghana's Food and Drugs Authority. Now, speaking at the launch, Ambassador of the EU to Ghana, Erchad Razali, pledged his outfit's continuous support for Ghana.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought to the fore the importance of investing in local vaccine manufacturing. This motivated government to set up the Presidential Vaccine Manufacturing Committee to oversee the agenda themed Transforming Ghana into Pan-African Vaccine Manufacturing Hub. The European Union is a major partner on this project. Here is its ambassador to Ghana, Erchad Razali.
We have mobilized today 2.8 million euro. This is just the beginning. But once again, it means that as we have done on the vaccines, EU has been by far the largest vaccine provider worldwide with 2.2 billion vaccines, twice as much as China, 3 times more than the US. The EU is as well now one of the first partners of Ghana in order to acquire and to establish and to build up a vaccine manufacturing facility.
Another partner of the project is the German Development Corporation. The corporation, through its subsidiary GIZ, is responsible for technical and logistical support. Dr. Holger Till is team leader for GIZ Development Partnerships in Health.
We have different fundings for the support to the vaccine committee. We have over a period of 3 years, we have a support of 5 million euros. In addition to it, this year we have 2 million euros. We are supporting the Ghanaian government in the area of vaccine uptake, vaccine logistics, working together directly with Ministry of Health and Ghana Health Service and other organizations to make sure that the level of vaccination in Ghana will rise. In addition, we are working together with the European Union, as today we have just seen, where we are contributing to the co-financing of this activity.
Chief Executive of the Food and Drugs Authority, Delis Mimi Dakon, stated that the project will strengthen capacity of the authority for vaccine production and market authorization.
In every country that vaccines are manufactured, the regulator has to, even though that the responsibility lies with the manufacturer, the regulator has that mandate to release every batch. And that is what the FDA is going to build capacity in. In the past, it was not a requirement. So even though we are maturity level 3, as a regulatory agency, we have not needed to be able to do lot release. So that is the capacity that we are now going to acquire. Because resources are scarce, if we do not need to release vaccines, we do not have to do it.
The Presidential Advisor on Health, Dr. Anthony Insia Asari, indicated that government will be collaborating with the private sector to establish vaccine manufacturing companies across the country.
What we want to do is to build capacity in Ghana for Ghana to become a hub, like it's been done in India and everywhere. So Ghana government is going to work through the private sector. So the private sector will be assisted, facilitated, and we coordinate the activities of the private sector to be able to put up factories in the country to provide a well-recognized vaccines and other biologicals.
The project, supporting vaccine manufacturing in Ghana, seeks to generate 5 million euros by 2024.
The Social Security and National Insurance Trust, SNIT, says it has made a 60 million cedi saving after halting the printing of the SNIT biometric cards for members in 2018. The Director General of SNIT, Dr. John Ofori-Tenkran, indicates the adoption of the Ghana card by the institution has been of tremendous benefit in its operations. He spoke at the 6th regional meeting of SNIT in Kumasi. There's more in this report.
The regional meetings of SNIT are aimed at sensitizing regional and district leaders of the Trades Union Congress about the scheme and the benefits offered to members to enable them plan effectively towards retirement. SNIT has currently merged the identity of more than 1.9 million Ghanaians to the National Identification Card. The Director General of SNIT, Dr. John Ofori-Tenkran, explains how the Ghana card has saved the cost of printing SNIT cards.
The card printing alone was costing us about, the card alone was costing about $7.1 American dollars, that is $7.10. So since we stopped printing cards, we've signed on about maybe call it some 1.2 million people. And then there are people whose cards have been lost and they've come and they needed it to be reprinted. And then there are the consumables that we use in printing the cards. The $7.1 was just the cost of the card at that time. So when you kind of work that mathematics, basically between when we stopped printing cards and now, we've saved about some 60 million Ghana cedis.
Meanwhile, Deputy General Secretary of the Trades Union Congress, Joshua Ansah, has bemoaned the meager salaries employers receive, which he says is affecting their retirement benefits.
As leaders of the unions, we need to actually begin discussing enhanced salary. And I think this year will begin the journey of an enhancement of salaries. Until we do that, what we put in as our contribution will definitely be the result of what we get when we retire. So as you get your employment letter today, you need to start thinking about your retirement.
The forum was on the theme Understanding the Value Proposition of SNIT, the role of organized labor as partners, and promoting the scheme among workers in Ghana. TUC Chairman in Ashanti Region, Daniel Amanfo Akwa, commended SNIT for continuously engaging workers and leadership of the TUC. He encouraged employees to take keen interest in their social security contributions and check their SNIT statements periodically.
Workers are supposed to make sure that their contributions are paid every month. If you are a worker, what you need to do is to make sure that at the end of every month, your contribution has been paid to SNIT. And it should be, it's not just for a joke. It should be something very serious to every employer to know that at this end of the month, has my boss paid my SNIT pension or my SNIT contribution? Yes, if he has paid, then you don't have a problem. Everybody must take interest.
Anita Sewajuka's report, read to you.
All right, let's quickly do this. Your money tips on Money Lab.
Hello there. Good to have you back on Money Lab. In our previous episode, we looked at the benefits of investing in government securities. And I'm sure you're wondering, so what are the tax implications of investing in government securities? And that's what we're dealing right here today. Now, fixed income securities issued by the government of Ghana, like treasury bills, bonds, notes, are not taxed. However, corporate bonds issued by large corporates such as Dachi PLC and Esla Bond withhold taxes of 1% on individuals and 8% on corporates. Money Lab, your friend in business. Thank you for joining us and see you next time.
There's more news on our website, myjoyonline.com/business, the day's latest stories over there. My name is Daryl. Thanks for watching. We will be back same time tomorrow. Goodbye.